3 o'clock in the morning, June the 6th, 1944. In a quiet house in North London, a radio operator taps out a call sign again and again into the darkness. He is calling Madrid. He is calling German intelligence. And he has the most important message of the entire war. Allied troops are on their way. The invasion of Europe has begun. The man behind this message is the most trusted German agent in Britain. Berlin believes in him completely. And here is the strange part. The warning is true, every word of it. Madrid does not answer. The German operators are asleep. By the time they finally respond, 5 hours later, American and British soldiers are already fighting and dying on the beaches of Normandy. The warning arrived too late to matter, and that was exactly the plan. Because this German agent was not working for Germany, and that true warning, sent into the dark at 3 in the morning, was about to become the foundation of the greatest lie of the Second World War. A lie that would freeze an entire German army in place, 150 miles from the real battle, while the fate of Europe was decided without it. This is the story of how one man saved D-Day, not by hiding the truth from Hitler, but by telling it to him. Act 1. The man nobody wanted. Juan Pujol García was born in Barcelona in 1912, the son of a factory owner. Nothing about his early life suggested greatness. He failed as a student. He failed as a cinema manager. He ran a chicken farm, and the chicken farm failed too. Then came the Spanish Civil War, and it tore his country apart. Pujol was conscripted, and he saw both sides of that war from the inside. He saw the Republic descend into terror, and he saw what Franco's nationalists did with victory. He would later claim, with a certain strange pride, that he managed to serve in the middle of a civil war without firing a single bullet for either side. He came out of that war with one conviction burned into him. He hated totalitarianism in every form, fascism and communism alike. And when Hitler's armies rolled across Europe in 1940, Pujol decided privately, absurdly, that he personally was going to do something about it. No army, no government, no weapon. One man quietly declaring his own war on Adolf Hitler. He walked into the British embassy in Madrid and offered his services as a spy. The British said no. He tried again, no. A third time, no. He had no military access, no connections, no experience. He was a failed chicken farmer with an idea. London was not interested. So Juan Pujol did something that should have gotten him killed. If the British would not take him as a spy, he would go to the Germans instead. He would become a German agent first, and then sell himself to London as a double agent, gift-wrapped. In 1941, he approached the Abwehr German military intelligence in Madrid. He posed as a fanatical fascist, a Spanish official who could travel to London. The Germans took the bait. They gave him secret ink, cash, cover addresses, and a code name. Arable. His mission: build a spy network in Britain. There was just one problem. Pujol had no intention of going to Britain. He could not have gotten there if he tried. Instead, he moved to Lisbon, and from a small room in neutral Portugal, he began to invent a British spy career out of thin air. His sources, as MI5 later recorded with something close to awe, were a tourist guidebook to England, a map, an out-of-date railway timetable, and whatever magazines and cinema newsreels he could find in the public library. He had never seen Britain. It showed. He reported that men in Glasgow would do anything for a liter of wine, apparently unaware that Scotland is not a wine-drinking country, and that Britain does not use liters. He invented troop movements based on train timetables. He described a Liverpool that existed only in his imagination. And the Germans believed all of it. They believed it because Pujol understood something fundamental about intelligence work. His reports were vivid, confident, and endless. He buried his handlers in detail, and when he needed sources for all this information, he simply invented them. A courier, a traveling salesman, One imaginary agent became three, became a network. Then came the report that changed everything. Pujol informed Madrid that a convoy of warships had left Liverpool, bound for the Mediterranean island of Malta. The German Navy scrambled. Aircraft went hunting. Resources burned. The convoy was never found for a simple reason. It had never existed. But here is the twist. The hunt for that phantom convoy was picked up by British code breakers, reading encrypted German traffic, and what they saw alarmed them deeply. Somewhere out there, a German super spy was running a network of agents across Britain. His reports were reaching the highest levels in Berlin, and MI5, the British security service, could not find him. They could not find him anywhere in Britain, because he was not in Britain. The most dangerous German agent in the United Kingdom was a Spaniard in a rented room in Lisbon, armed with a library card and a railway timetable. And in early 1942, when the British finally traced him and understood what he had been doing, entirely alone, entirely unpaid, entirely for his own private war against Hitler, they made a decision that would echo all the way to the beaches of Normandy. This time, when Juan Pujol offered his services, Britain said yes. Act 2, the Bank of Trust. In April 1942, Pujol was smuggled to London. MI5 gave him a new code name. The Germans had Arable. The British, in honor of what they called the best actor in the world, chose Garbo. He was paired with an MI5 officer named Tomas Harris, an art dealer, half Spanish, fluent, brilliant. Pujol and Harris became one of the strangest and most effective partnerships of the war. Together, over the next 2 years, they wrote what was essentially an enormous novel, delivered to German intelligence one report at a time. The imaginary network exploded. The fake agents Pujol had invented in Lisbon now acquired colleagues, friends, sub-sources, lovers, grudges, and salaries. A Welsh nationalist who hated the English, a Venezuelan student, a disgruntled airline employee, an anti-communist Greek sailor. By the end of the war, German intelligence was funding a network of 27 agents in Britain. Every single one of them was fiction. Berlin paid them generously, real money for imaginary people, and the Germans considered it money well spent because the network delivered. Its reports were detailed, plausible, and, crucially, often true. That was the secret engine of the whole operation. Truth in carefully measured doses. The method worked like this. British intelligence would feed Garbo genuine information, real facts about troop movements, real names, real preparations, things the Germans would eventually confirm from other sources. But each true report was timed to arrive just slightly too late to be useful, accurate enough to verify, late enough to be harmless. Every confirmed report was a deposit in a bank of trust, and when something went wrong, Pujol and Harris turned even failure into credibility. The masterpiece was The Agent in Liverpool, a Swiss man named Garbo, one of the original inventions from the Lisbon days. In 1943, a major fleet movement was about to leave Liverpool, something a real agent in that city could not possibly have missed. If Garbo stayed silent, the Germans might smell a rat, so Garbo fell ill. His report stopped, and then Garbo died. An obituary for this entirely fictional man was placed in the local newspaper, where German intelligence could find it and check it. Madrid sent condolences, and then Berlin quietly arranged a pension for his widow. A widow who did not exist, mourning a man who had never lived, paid for with real German money. By the beginning of 1944, the Garbo network was German intelligence's crown jewel in Britain. Between January and June of that year alone, Garbo sent more than 500 radio messages to Madrid. Berlin trusted Arable more than its own air reconnaissance. Which was exactly the point, because the moment was coming when all of that trust, every deposit made over 2 long years, would be spent in a single night, on the biggest lie of the war. Act 3, The Army That Never Was. By 1944, everyone in Europe knew the invasion was coming. That was the problem. You cannot hide 1 million men and 5,000 ships. The Germans knew the Allies would land in France. The only questions were where and when. Look at the map the way Berlin did. The English Channel is narrowest at the Strait of Dover, opposite the Pas de Calais. Shortest crossing, shortest supply lines, quickest road into Germany. Calais was the obvious answer, and the Germans, being professionals, prepared for the obvious. The 15th Army, with the strongest fortifications on the coast, stood waiting there. The real target, of course, was Normandy, 150 miles to the west. So Allied deception planners faced a brutal equation. They could not make the invasion invisible. Their only option was to make it deniable, to convince Berlin that whatever happened in Normandy was not the real thing, that the true blow, the main invasion, would come later at Calais. The plan was called Operation Fortitude. An entire phantom army was conjured into existence in the southeast of England, opposite Calais. The first United States Army group. On paper, it dwarfed the real invasion force. In the fields of Kent stood its tanks, inflatable rubber decoys. In the harbors floated its landing craft, plywood and canvas. Its radio operators filled the air with the traffic of divisions that did not exist. And at its head, for German consumption, stood the one Allied general the Germans feared most, George Patton. The set was built, but a stage set needs a storyteller, someone Berlin already believed. The main channel for delivering the lie of fortitude was Agent Arable, Juan Pujol García. Through the spring of 1944, Garbo's imaginary agents fanned out across southeast England, and their reports flowed to Madrid. Troop concentrations in Kent, insignia of new American formations, rumors among the dock workers. Piece by piece, the Phantom Army Group assembled itself in German files, one plausible detail at a time. And it worked its way to the very top. On May the 27th, 10 days before D-Day, Hitler met the Japanese ambassador in Berlin and told him, in confidence, exactly what he expected. The Allies would land at the Pas de Calais. There might be diversionary attacks elsewhere first, perhaps in Normandy or Brittany. He would not move his forces from Calais to chase them. Read that again. Before a single Allied soldier touched a beach, Hitler had already been taught how to explain away the real invasion. Then came the night of June the 5th, and MI5 did something that looks, at first glance, completely insane. They decided that Garbo would warn the Germans that the invasion was coming. The logic was cold and precise. After the landings, the Germans would reconstruct events. If their best agent in Britain had somehow missed D-Day itself, his network would be worthless, and so would everything it said afterward. But if his warning arrived just too late to act on, his credibility would survive the invasion. The lie that mattered was still to come, and it needed a messenger the Germans would believe. So Madrid was told to listen for an urgent transmission in the small hours of June the 6th. At 3 in the morning, Garbo's operator began to call, and the Germans, on the most important night of the war, were not listening. No answer at 4. No answer at 5. On the beaches, the first landing craft dropped their ramps. The German operators finally came on the air at 8 in the morning, when the invasion was already screaming from every radio in Europe. A catastrophe for Garbo. Pujol and Harris turned it inside out. Garbo raged at Madrid like a betrayed professional. "I cannot accept excuses or negligence," he told them. "Were it not for my ideals, I would abandon the work." And since the warning was now officially late, he could safely pack it with genuine, verifiable detail after detail, proving that his network had known everything first. That evening's transmission ran to 129 minutes. The Germans apologized to their agent. The landings themselves had succeeded. 150,000 men were ashore, but ashore is not the same as safe. The Normandy beachhead was shallow, crowded, and fragile, and everyone on both sides knew what would decide its fate: speed. The German 15th Army stood at Calais with its armor, close enough to tip the balance if it moved. The soldiers on the beaches were racing to unload supplies faster than Germany could bring reserves against them. And in those first days after the landings, German commanders began demanding the obvious. Normandy is the invasion. Release the 15th Army. Send the tanks west now and drive the Allies into the sea. Everything Fortitude had built was about to collapse on contact with reality, unless someone Berlin trusted told them, one more time, to wait. Act 4. The message that stopped an army. On the night of June the 9th, 3 days after D-Day, Garbo sent the message that his entire war had been building toward. He had conferred, he said, with his best agents across England, and their conclusion was unanimous and alarming. The Normandy landing was a trap, a large-scale diversion designed to pull German reserves west, away from the real target. The first United States Army group under Patton had not moved. 75 Allied divisions stood in England, and the main blow was still to come, across the narrow sea at the Pas de Calais. Moving the 15th Army west now, Garbo warned, was exactly what the Allies wanted Germany to do. In reality, there were nowhere near 75 divisions in Britain. The army group was rubber, plywood, and radio static. The agents were ghosts. Every operational claim in the message was false. The message climbed the chain, Madrid to Berlin, Berlin to the High Command. It reached Hitler's own headquarters, and the order that mattered was given. The 15th Army stayed at Calais. Field Marshal Rommel, fighting for his life in Normandy, wanted those divisions desperately. His superior, von Rundstedt, convinced the real invasion was still coming at Calais, would not release them. At the end of June, 3 weeks into the Battle of Normandy, 22 German divisions still stood at the Pas de Calais, guarding the coast against an army of rubber tanks. And they stayed there, 2 armored divisions and 19 infantry divisions, through July, and into August, while the Allies won the battle 150 miles away. The Allies poured men and supplies into the beachhead they had been allowed to keep. When the breakout came at the end of July, it was unstoppable. Paris fell in August. The German front in France collapsed. And then came the strangest tribute of the war. On July the 29th, 1944, while his lie was still pinning an army to the wrong coastline, Juan Pujol received word from Madrid. For his extraordinary services to the Reich, the Führer had personally approved the award of the Iron Cross, an honor normally reserved for frontline combat. Pujol thanked them by radio with becoming modesty. 5 months later, in a quiet ceremony in London, the same man was made a member of the Order of the British Empire. 1 war, 2 decorations, 1 from each side. Juan Pujol García remains the only person of the Second World War known to have been decorated by both Germany and Britain for the same work. The Germans simply never found out what that work had actually been. To the end of the war and beyond it, Berlin believed Arable had been theirs. The verdict. So did one man really save D-Day? Some historians would stop the story right here. The Germans, they point out, believed in Calais long before Garbo said a word. Berlin deceived itself first, and the spy merely confirmed a mistake the Germans were already determined to make. Fair enough, but that objection misses what actually happened in June. Because by the 9th of June, reality was correcting the German error, hour by hour. The greatest fleet in history sat off the Normandy coast. Hundreds of thousands of men were ashore. German commanders on the ground were shouting the truth up the chain of command. This is the invasion. Left alone, even Hitler's headquarters would have accepted the obvious within days, and the tanks would have rolled west. Garbo's real achievement was not creating the German mistake. It was forbidding its correction. At the precise moment when the evidence became overwhelming, the one source Berlin trusted most looked at the real invasion and called it a decoy. He did not tell the Germans something new. He told them they had been right all along. And that is the one line no one on earth checks. And notice the strangest thing about the man who told it. Juan Pujol boasted that he had once gone through an entire civil war without firing a single shot. He went through a world war the same way. He never carried a rifle. He never gave an order. His only weapon was trust, patiently manufactured for 2 years and spent in a single night. And with it, he held more enemy divisions out of a battle than most generals ever commanded into one. It is hard to name anyone in that war who hurt fewer people and decided more, which leaves an uncomfortable question hanging over every history book. If wars can be won like this, what are they really fought with? As for the man himself, his war ended in silence. Fearing Nazi revenge, Pujol staged one final deception, this time with himself as the fictional casualty. In 1949, word spread through intelligence circles that Juan Pujol had died of malaria in Angola. Like the death of the Liverpool agent, it was announced, believed, and mourned. And like that death, it was fiction. The dead man moved to Venezuela, grew a beard, and spent the next 35 years running a small bookstore, telling no one, not even his own children, who he had been. In 1984, a British writer named Nigel, after years of searching, finally traced the greatest double agent of the war to a quiet house in Caracas. Pujol came back from the dead one last time. He was received at Buckingham Palace, and on the 6th of June, 1984, 40 years to the day after his 3 o'clock call into the darkness, an elderly Spanish gentleman stood on the sand at Normandy, among the graves of the men who had landed there, and wept. He had spent the war as 27 people who never existed. He died, for real this time, in 1988 as something rarer. The one man both sides of the Second World War had thanked, and only one side had understood. The next time someone tells you that one person cannot change history, remember the failed chicken farmer from Barcelona, a library card, an out-of-date railway timetable, and the army that spent the summer of 1944 guarding the wrong beach.